This is Ajmal the developer and welcome to JavaScript crash course for beginners. So what is JavaScript? JavaScript is a high-level interpreted programming language. So high-level means that unlike Java, which is totally a different language, it's a programming language off the record. So unlike Java or C plus programming language where there is memory management on your machine um, uh, and there's a compiling. For example, there's compiling when it comes to Java on C or C plus, but with JavaScript there is no such um, memory management or compiling. So therefore, it is a high level language, and it is mostly run on browser. For example, on Chrome browser, there is a V8 built-in engine, which is designed to run JavaScript, as well as we can run JavaScript on Node.js, which is a software package built to serve as a runtime environment for JavaScript on your machine, as opposed to running on browser. So JavaScript can be run both on your Chrome browser or any other browser, but mostly on Chrome browser, as well as on Node.js software software package. Second point, JavaScript conforms to the ECMAScript specification. There are some specifications according to ECMAScript organization or ECMA organization, and JavaScript does conform to them. So that's another benefit of JavaScript. Third benefit is that JavaScript is multi-paradigm, meaning that it means that you can write either object-oriented language or object-oriented code or functional code. Um, I don't want to go into detail with object-oriented or functional way of coding, but because that's pretty low level. But for now, all you need to know is that JavaScript can be multi-paradigm. It can be object-oriented or functional. Fourth, this actually refers to the first point. So Java runs on client, which is your machine on Node.js or browser, browser or Node.js. So it runs on two different platforms. And you would ask why should someone learn JavaScript? And these are the reasons. It is the programming language of the browser, so most of the content on your browser, such as web pages, blogs, tables, buttons, you name it, they're all built by JavaScript. So hence JavaScript is the programming language of the browser. And second reason, it's built very interactive user interfaces. It builds very interactive user interfaces with frameworks like React or Angular. It's used in building very fast server-side and full-stack applications. So lately, JavaScript has been enhanced to build not only front-end application but also full-stack applications. And JavaScript has been advanced by companies like Facebook, which designed React, and Google, which designed Angular, and also Microsoft came up with TypeScript, which is the superset of JavaScript framework. So these three frameworks actually fast track the use and the usability of JavaScript. Also, it's used in mobile development like React Native, Native Script, or Ionic. so that's another advantage. It's also used in desktop applications development, which is Electron.js. And what will you learn in this course? You might be curious. So first thing first, we'll take a deep dive in variables and data types, also arrays. We're also going to take a look at object literals, as well as methods for strings, arrays, objects, loops, while loop, for, off, for each, or map, conditionals. So we're going to take a look at if, ternary, and switch conditions, as well as we'll do some functions. We'll make use of normal and arrow functions, and also OOP, or object-oriented programming, such as prototypes and classes. Also DOM, document object modeling selection. So we'll play with some tables, and we will demonstrate how we can manipulate the DOM, which brings us to DOM manipulation. Also, we're gonna take a look at some events. So we're gonna code some events for our web pages, for example, on click or on browser, on mouse events. We will also do some basic form validations. And that being said, let's jump in coding. So as you can see here, I have a folder. It's best to have all of your files in one folder. I've called it JS Crash Course folder. So in this folder, we got a index where we write our HTML code, and in main.js where we write our JavaScript code, and in a style.css we do our styling. As you can see in our index.html page, we have a simple boilerplate with some table that I've commented them out because we're gonna not use them at the beginning of the course, but we would rather use them at the end of the course. And in our style, we have a boilerplate style here. So I wrote these ahead so that we could save time, because the course is, I want to keep it short and sweet. And this is where the fun comes in. This is our JavaScript, so we will actually be writing JavaScript codes from the beginning so that you guys know where to start from. Before we do our coding, I want to show you something quick. I have downloaded a extension. It's called Live Server code, and save, and then you see the change right away on the browser. So it makes your development very fast and rapid. It saves you time from going to the browser and refreshing it, which I will show you in a minute. So be sure to download this Live Server extension, and once you do that, you will see a icon at the bottom here, Go Live, as you can see over here at the bottom taskbar on the right hand corner. So when you do click on this, it starts a server, and your application runs on JavaScript on a browser. So we're gonna split the screen so that we can see what we do. All right, so we got that. On the left is our HTML of what we have, and we can start coding here. So first thing first, we're gonna start on variables. There are three types of variables. There's var, which is the most common. It has its advantages and disadvantages. There's also, I'm gonna comment this so that it doesn't apply. So we have var, we also have let, as well as we have const. So three different variables perform three different functions, and they have different benefits and disadvantages. So for var, it has global scope. So it has global scope, meaning that you can assign value to a variable in one block of code and access it from other block or even from other bodies of code. So that's the advantage of variable. But the disadvantage is that, for example, when you do assign value to one variable, and if you go and assign another value to that variable, so it would rewrite the initial value. That would be the disadvantage. And we can actually go ahead and demonstrate this on this console here. So if you go to your browser and right click and go to inspect and then click on console, so you can actually write code here and implement them. For example, if I write var say age equals 30, enter, and then let's do console.log and let's call age here. So console.log is basically you log out the definition of a certain variable. You can see we got 30, which is the value of variable age. And if we were to write var age equals say 31 right now, and console.log that age says 31 right now. As you can see, we easily changed the value of variable age from 30 to 31, so that this would be the disadvantage. In order to prevent that from happening, we can actually make use of let. If you do let say let DOB or date of birth equals say, so it's a string, it should come in between the quotes, say September 2020 or 2010, and console.log that DOB, enter, September 2020, right? So if we were to do let DOB equals September 2015, enter that, and then do again console.log DOB, shows undefined, because let is designed so that we cannot reassign value to our variables, and that's the advantage of let. So if you don't want your variable to have global scope and you want your variable to have block scope, so that you can only call your variable from within a scope, it's best to use let. And the third value is const. Const also has block scope, and it has so it has new value. New value cannot be reassigned to it. It's similar to let, but it's best to see it in action. For example, if we do say const say const name equals Alex, and let's call that name console.log name Alex. Okay, and let's do name equals, so we are reassigning it a different name, say Joe. Joe needs to be within quotes because it's a string, right? So name equals Joe. It throws an error, so you cannot reassign new values to name when you use const as opposed to say var last name equals Yaftali. What is the because yeah, because I added a space between last and name. That's not a valid variable name. Or last name equals Yaftali. Enter. Okay, and if you do console.log, do last name, it should print out the value. Okay, great. So we got Yaftali there, and if we try to reassign new value to that variable, it should work. So if you do last name equals say Ray, random last name, there you go. And if you do console.log, say last name, the value is Ray. So in variable case we were able to reassign a new value, but with const we cannot do that. So those are the advantages and disadvantages of different variable types. So it's all up to you as a developer which variable type you want to go with. But if it was up to me, if I wanted my code to be safe and not to throw error in the future, I would definitely go ahead with let or const, depends on the project scope. So that is that for our let's do a clear. We're gonna clear the screen here, and let's start with next point on our course, data types. These are very important. Data types. In data types we have several different data types that are the building block of JavaScript or any other language for that matter. And first one on the list is a string. A string could be a bunch of characters. It could be a name. It could be anything in letters would be string. And to demonstrate this in action, we're going to go ahead on our console and do a variable, say full name equals John, and we're going to enter. And there is a function called typeof where we can find the type of a certain variable. And in the between the brackets, we're gonna pass the full name or the name of the variable and semicolon and enter string. As you can see, the Google or the Chrome engine has passed the value of full name, which is the type of this variable name is a string, in fact. So that proves the fact that name is a string. And second data type is numbers, which is pretty common. So these could be any number from 1 to infinity, and they cannot be decimal numbers. For example, they can be 1.2 or 2.6, whatever. They have to be whole numbers, and we're gonna demonstrate that in action as well. We're gonna do variable age. We already use age, so we're gonna do age 1 equals, say, 25, enter, and then do type of age 1 number. There you go. So type of age 1 is number. So that's that for numbers. And for numbers with decimal, the type of that kind of number is called integer. So it's number with point whatever. And 1 to infinity, that's how you spell infinity, I believe. I could be wrong, but let's leave it like that. Integer, so would be decimal numbers, for example 2.5, and we're gonna assign a decimal value here. So let's do const decimal equals 2.5, and let's do type of decimal number. Weird, should have said integer. Action. So next data type is Boolean, and Boolean can have the value of either true or false. So basically means either a condition is true or it's false. And let's demonstrate this in our console. So let's do a const is cool equals true. Is the weather cool? It's either it could either have a value of true or false. And if we do type of say is cool Boolean, you can see there. Similarly, we can have variable is hot equals false, and if we do type of is hot, it already says there Boolean. So again, Boolean can have either false or true value. And our next data type is null. Basically null means no value. It has no value at all. It's a variable with empty value that can be reassigned and a value in the future. For example, as a developer, when you do write your code for certain variables, you don't want to assign values at the beginning, and rather you want to assign values at the end of your coding block or function. And that's the purpose of null. To demonstrate that, we can do a let x equals null, and we can do type of x type of X is object. So X is an object which is null, but unfortunately with this V8 engine you cannot get the null value of null. All it says is object, meaning that an object can be assigned to this value. So that is that, and next we have the value undefined. It's similar to null, but it has different application. So for example, if we do say const y equals undefined, it's undefined, and if you do type of y, it gives us undefined. So null and undefined are quite similar, although there are some differences, but I don't want to get into that right now because time is of the essence. And basically means concatenating or attaching two objects together. For example, we can assign say const first name equals John, and we can do, why did we get unexpected? Oh, because I put uppercase C, it should be lowercase c. Const first name equals John, and we can do const last name equals Smith, and this is where concatenation comes into play. So if you do console dot log, and if we, the way it's done is you would put the first variable, first name, well, first name 1, plus is the concatenation way of doing it. That's the symbol for concatenation. We're gonna add a space here and then concatenate again to our last name, and if we enter, we should get full name John Smith. So we have concatenated John to Smith, which produces John Smith. So that's the beauty of concatenation. There is another way of concatenation which is called taking advantage of template string. And what template string is it's an object encapsulated into some curly brackets, and that has been designed in React by Facebook team, and I can demonstrate how we do that as well. So for example, if you do const hello, if you do const hello equals say, and be sure to use backticks in this type of concatenation or template string. We use backtick, which can be found just below the escape keyboard on my laptop, which is HP. So you put a backtick, and then you write my name is, and these template strings, the syntax is as such. So $, open curly brackets, say name, name1, which was a variable we declared earlier, which contains the value of John. So name1 is the variable, and I am again $, open curly bracket, age, which we also declared earlier. I believe it's 25. And again, backtick to close the sentence, and we put the semicolon and enter that. So that value has been defined, and if we console.log our variable hello, we should get that string. My name is John and I'm 31 years old. So as you can see here, this is a better way of concatenating, because you can call any variable within your curly brackets and have achieved the same result. So it's a quicker way of doing it, and also it's a neater way of coding. So I would definitely encourage taking advantage of template strings. So moving along, our next subject is a string properties, and methods. String properties and method is what we're talking about in this segment of the course, and we're gonna go ahead and assign a string to a variable, and then console.log that to use the string properties and methods. So we're gonna do maybe const str for a string equals hello world, which is the pretty standard the standard string that we use in software development. So if you do console.log, and if you pass in the string or the variable string or the variable value, which is a string, or the const value for that matter, and take advantage of the length property. So we're basically counting the length of that string, which is all these characters. So this property would internally go ahead and count all these characters, including the space, if I'm not wrong. So let's see that in action. We're gonna save this and go on the browser, inspect the console. We should see a number, and there you go, we got 12. So if we count the characters, we got from right to left, so we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So I am right. Space is also a part of that number, and we got 12. So that's one way of using the string properties. We can also do a string method, and for that we can do a string dot there's a property, it's called to uppercase, and because it is a method but not property, we have to use a parenthesis. So when these two parentheses come after a object, that object is basically a method. So what method is? It is basically a function associated with this property or with this string, and this method should convert all of these letters to uppercase, as the name says. And if we control save that, there you go, we have all in uppercase, hello world. And similarly we have two lowercase, so lowercase, and you guess it should turn it to lowercase, and they're all lowercase. So we also have something called substring method, which pulls a string out of this sentence and you can specify that by setting values, and I will demonstrate that in a minute. So we would do a string dot substring, and in between the parentheses you can actually indicate the indexes of the string. So in this case we would do 0 to 5, and keep in mind that indexes of a string are 0 based, meaning that they start from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and so on. So in this case 0 is H, 1 is E, 2 is L, 3 is L as well, and 4 is O, and 5 is the space that we have there. So in this scenario it would pull out the letters or characters starting from H all the way before 5. So when you do indicate an index in this scenario, it would stop at 5, so not including the 5. That is important to remember. And let's go ahead and control save that, and there you go, we got H here. So you can see the usage of this in computer programming. There might be scenarios that you want to basically extract a letter of a sentence or a character for whatever reason, and in that scenario you can use the substring method. Methods, you can actually concatenate two methods, not concatenate, but combine them together. Concatenate wouldn't be the technically correct way of putting it. So you could do a string dot substring dot to uppercase. So basically you pull out the hello from hello world and change it to uppercase. So we're using not two methods, but one method and one property here. One string method and one string property, and they both work in parallel. So if we control S that, something went wrong here. Let's see what is the issue. Oh, I was wrong. My apologies. To local. No, that's not to uppercase. To uppercase is what I meant, and I made a mistake. To uppercase is also a method, not property. So we need to include the parentheses. So basically we are combining two methods, the substring method and the to uppercase method together. So if we do Control S, we should see hello world in capital, which we see there. So what it does is it goes extract this hello from hello world sentence, and this method would convert it to uppercase, and you get the idea. So that is pretty cool. Cool method that we can use in this scenario is something called a split. So what a split does is it splits the character into it splits the sentence into different characters, and it's best to demonstrate it. So let's go ahead and do that. So we would do string split parentheses, and in between parentheses we can identify how we want to split it. So in this case we split each character from a space. So for that we would just do double quotes, and we do Control S. And I know we haven't talked about array just yet, not array but array just yet, but you see all the letters are separated into different array indexes. You might think that what is the use of this, but in this scenario it's not that useful. But if we, for example, if we had different objects, for example computers, maybe coding, software, so we have three different objects in our string. So for this type of a string, we can actually put a comma and a space, because after every single object, we have a comma and a space. So that would be our separator here, comma and a space. And if we control is that, we have an array of different different objects. So you can see we got computer, coding, software, and so on. So you can see the functionality of using the split method is arrays. So what are arrays? Arrays are basically they're basically variables that hold multiple values. So variable, we can't spell variable. Variables that hold values. That would be the definition of not just values but multiple values. So that would be the definition of arrays, and there are a bunch of different arrays, and there is one that is pretty old that doesn't get used very often. So we're gonna first start with that, and then we can move on to the next types of arrays. And that array that doesn't get used that often is called constructor arrays. And the way you do that would be, for example, const numbers equals new array. And whenever you see new, the word new before whatever, it is a constructor. So you're constructing something. So that is something to keep in mind. New in front of a object is constructor. So let's do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we have a array with we have a array with 5 values, and if we do console.log numbers, control save that, and you see we have an array with 5 values, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that is for constructor array, and for the rest we can just simply do const say let's do const fruits equals and this is regular array. So for regular array we take advantage of square brackets, and every object is encapsulated in quotes. Keep that in mind. So apples, and then we had a comma to start the next object, say oranges, and comma again, and then pears. So that is our array. And if you were to do console.log fruits, control S, and there you go, we got an array with 3 objects. We got apples, oranges, and pears. You can also add different data types in a variable. For example, you could put number 10, and I could have boolean, for example, true. And if I was to control S, save that, you see we got 10 and true. One thing to keep in mind is that JavaScript is not statically typed, meaning that you cannot do something like const, for example, fruits and say array. So you cannot statically type JavaScript. And for that, there is another language called TypeScript that is the superset of JavaScript. So meaning that TypeScript has every feature in JavaScript plus additional features such as statically typing. So that would be TypeScript, which is a superset of JavaScript. Something to keep in mind. And Okay, so moving on, what if you wanted to access, for example, oranges in the array? And for that, you would do exactly the same, but you would add the square brackets in your console.log, and you specify the index. And for orange, the index would be 1. So if we control S that, we should get orange, and there you go. We have orange there. And similarly, if you want to get the pairs, you would obviously do 2 and then save that, and we got pair there. And if you wanted to get the true, you would do 3 4, so you would do 4 and then save. That is for that. One thing to keep in mind is that arrays are zero based, meaning that first object is 0, second is 1, third is 2, fourth is 3, and fifth is 5. So it starts from 0 1 2 3 4 5. And another cool thing is that you can actually reassign values to different indexes. For example, you could do fruits, say 3, which is pairs. You can reassign a new value to that, and you can do, say, grapes. And if you were to do console.log fruits here, we got grapes as opposed to pears. So that is something to keep in mind as well. However, doing this is not the best way to do it, and there's something called dot push string manipulation, which is specifically designed for this type of situation. And for that, we can do, let's do, as opposed to reassigning new value, we can do fruits dot push. Fruits dot push. Let's do, for example, mangoes, and control save. So there you go. We got mangoes pushed to the end of the array. So that is fruit.push, the string manipulation, .pop, and we specify the last index. And if you control save that, there you go. We don't have true at the end. Something to keep in mind is that push and pop only work with the last index, so it can only pop objects to the last index and push objects from the last to the last index. So that's something to keep in mind. So if you wanted to remove an index from the beginning, there is another method called unshift. For example, we could, if we do fruits dot unshift, fruits dot unshift, let's not remove but to add fruits, say strawberry. So if we wanted to add a object at the beginning of an array, we can take advantage of fruits.unshift method. And if we write fruits.unshift and add the fruit strawberry and control save that, you can see we have a strawberry at the beginning of our string here. We also have something called array.isArray. Basically, it's a method to check for a certain object within an array, and to do that we would do fruits, or not fruits, but it would be in the console.log section actually. So we would do console.log, and the method would be array.isArray, and in between the parentheses you pass in the object that you're looking for, in this case say hello. Obviously hello is not in our array, so we should get a false value. There you go, we have the value false, meaning that hello is not in our array, which obviously it's not. We also have a method called index of. We can get the index of any object here, and for that you would do console.logs. You would pass in the array name, fruits, and then dot, and then you would pass in the method, which is index of, and then you would pass in the name of that object. In this scenario we would do apples, and save and run. We got 0, so index of apple is 0, so we get the index there. That is the advantage of using index method. So I think that is it for arrays, and we have covered pretty much the basics, and let's clear all of this. And next up on the on our agenda is object literals. Object literals, what it is basically they are key value pairs. So let's do a const person equals open curly bracket, close curly bracket, and for first name, we have say John, and last name we have Doe, John Doe, and for age we have 30, and we can also do arrays within our object literal. We can do hobbies, say music, movies, sports, and we can even do embedded objects, so objects within objects. In this case, address, say, so address, let's do a street 50 Main Street, city Toronto, and province Ontario. So that is syntax for object literals. So this would be the key, and this would be the value. So that makes the key value pair. So first name is key and the value is John, and they both make up the key value pair. And let's go ahead and console.log the whole thing first. If we save this, we should see the whole thing here. And as you can see here, we have the first name John, last name Doe, age 30, hobbies, array of 3 values, and address in between. If we expand that, we get the entire object literal key value pairs. So we have first name, last name, the address, and the embedded object. So if we wanted to access a single key value, we could take advantage of the dot syntax. We could do person dot first name. Well, what is happening? I cannot type. First name, and if we run this, we get John. And if you wanted to, for example, get music out of the array hobbies, we could do hobbies curly bracket and 0 for the music index, and if we save that we get music. Pretty pretty intuitive, right? So you can also call in two value pairs. For example, you can do person dot first name, comma, person dot last name, and if we save that we should get the first and last name there, John Doe. So you can also pull out maybe street value. For that you would do person dot dot address dot street, and we got 50 Main Street, and that is for that. You can also do something called destructuring. For example, pull values out of our object literal and assign it to variable, and in that for that we would do, for example, const open curly braces, and let's do first name, last name, and equals person. So think of this as not assigning values to person, but pulling values out of person. I'd log say first name, we get John, which is the first name. We can also do say address colon curly braces again, city, and if we do if we log the city out, and if you save that, we get the city, which is Toronto. Pretty neat. Oh, also you can add new objects to our object literal by doing, for example, person dot email equals say John at gmail.com, and if we console dot log person, we should have the email included in our object literal. And if we expand this, we got an email added to object literal John. So most of the time you would be dealing with arrays of objects, and for that let's create a brand new array. So if we do const maybe to-dos, if you do const to-dos, and let's do a ID of 1 and text let's say take out the trash, and a boolean value is completed, let's do true, and close this. Let's copy this and paste this two more times. All right. Okay, so So let's change this to 2 and change this to 3. It is yeah, we need to add a semicolon at the end here, and we have an extra bracket here. Okay, so what is the const to do's equals, oh, we forgot the equal here. Okay, so we have an array with 3 different embedded objects within them, and if we were to do, say, console.log to do's and run that, we have an array with 3 different objects, and we have our object 1, object 2, object 3. So take out the let's change this to something else that's not very interesting. Let's say meeting, and let's say dentist appointment. So save this one more time. So now we have 3 distinct objects, and why don't we change this to false, so that is not completed. And we have 3 different objects, to do objects, and 2 of them are completed and 1 of them are not. So we have this figured out, and if you have learned what we have done so far, I want to throw in a challenge. I want you to go ahead and print this text meeting. If you have to, you can pause this video and go ahead and print that. So the way you would do that would be to go to to-dos, and first thing we want to go to that array index, which is array index number 1. So that's 0, this is 1. We're going to, so what we're doing is we're going to to-dos object, and then we're moving into array 1, and then we want to specify the property within that array, which is dot text. So if we control save that, we should be able to print out this meeting on the console. There you go. So we got the meeting printed out, and that is the method of accessing properties within array. So since we're working on this object literals within array, I want to take some time to talk about JSON. So it's spelled like so, JSON, and it stands for JavaScript Object Notation. JavaScript Object Notation, if I'm not wrong. And what it is JSON is a data structure format. It's used for full stack development, as well as data exchange. For example, an API receiving data, sending data, we use JSON. To demonstrate that, I'm actually going to copy this entire array, and I'm going to go to a JSON, not JSON, but JSON formatter. So we're looking for free for that's the one. And if you paste that in here and format to JSON, you can see over here that the format is pretty much the same as JSON, except for we have these double quotes around our key values, or the object keys. So we have these quotes around our values or key values. So that is the only difference. I wanted to point that out. So there is actually a method for turning this entire array into a JSON data structure, and for that we're just gonna create a variable, call it const to do JSON, and this would be the method. So we would do JSON dot stringify, JSON.stringify, and in the method we're going to pass our array variable, which is to do's, and if we do console.log and pass in this JSON to do variable or to do JSON variable, we should be able to get the JSON format for our array. Console.log JSON to do JSON to do. Maybe if I pass this after our variable, that might work. There you go. So as you can see, we have the entire array turned into JSON. You can see we got double quotes, so that's how you can tell that it is a JSON data format right now. So that is for JSON stringify, and now I want to talk a little bit or in depth, not much in depth, but a little bit about loops. I'm actually going to keep this object literal and just start a loop, because we're going to loop through this object strings. So we're going to start with for loop first. And the way it works is you would do a for and then open parentheses, and you pass in 3 parameters. First one is let I, so you're assigning a variable I, which stands for iterator variable, and we're assigning the value of 0 to that, and then we're gonna declare a condition to that variable. So we want that to be less than 10, and we're gonna iterate or increment we're gonna increment the I variable, and we're gonna open a curly bracket, and we're gonna do console.log I. We're gonna log out the I. So I want to explain what it is here. So we pass the variable I and assign it a value of 0, and then we increment I to the value of 1, and then we condition the variable I to be less than 10. So essentially I goes 1 plus, loops over 1, and then loops again until it's less than 10. So why don't we see this in action? So if we do console.log and we pass in the I variable, and if we save this, you can see it prints starting from 0 all the way through 10. So if we do console.log and pass in the variable I, and if we control save that, you can see we have 0 through 9 printed out. That is because the condition is if I is less than 9. So what happens is when I hits 9, it stops, because that is the condition. And if you want to print the entire numbers from 0 to 10, you would do less than equals 10, and that should print from 0 to 10. If you save this, we have 10, 0 to 10. So we can pass in even strings and concatenate it with this variable. That still works, and let's go ahead and do that. That would be a neater way to do it. So we can take advantage of string templates. So we pass in the backticks, and you would write the string. So for loop number and colons, and then you pass in your string template syntax, which is $, curly brackets, and then you pass in your variable of I. And if we save this, you see we got the values as well as the string. So for loop number 0, 1, 2, 3, and this is also another fancy way of printing the values along with a string. So that is for that. So we also have while loop. It's similar, but it has different syntax and different structure. So let's do that. So this is different. So you declare the variable outside your condition bracket. So you would do let I equals 0, and then you open your while condition, and then the condition would be I less than 10, and then you open your curly bracket, and in between you can actually pass in your console.log. And one thing to keep in mind is you have to add your incrementation at the below your console. So you would do I++, because if you don't declare this variable I++ incrementation or increment, if you don't do the I++, then your loop will never end, because it would keep running infinity. So you want to make sure you do that. And then if I save this, if I save this, I should get 0, 1 to 9. So this is how you would loop through a variable. But actually what I wanted to show you guys is to loop through this array. So we're gonna get rid of this for now. And the way you would do that would be exactly the same, except for the condition less than or equal 10. We're gonna put or pass the to-dos dot length property, and over here in the console we're going to change this to say to-dos, and we're going to pass in the variable I for iteration, and we're going to pass in the text property because we want to loop through this to-do array. We're going to loop through this, and we're going to print out the text property with its values. So if you save this, what is wrong here? Cannot read text of undefined. Okay, we did for let I equal 0, I less than, maybe we shouldn't pass in the equal sign. Less than to-dos dot length, length, length. Okay, that's fine. Console.log, to-dos.text. Okay, let's save this. Okay, there you go. So the issue was that we added the equal sign. So equal sign wouldn't work in this scenario, and because to-dos has its own length. So you can see we have all the text printed out. We have take out the trash, meeting, dentist. All right, that is for that. Now, this is not the best way to loop through arrays. There is something called for off loop, and we're gonna do that so that you have an idea of looping through arrays in a better way. So for off loop, you would do that in such manner. So you would do for open brackets, and in between brackets you would declare a variable. In this scenario, we would do let to do. So this could be anything. I could put T, or I could put B, any other names, but to do makes sense in this scenario. So we would do let to do off to do's. Now to do's is array, so we're assigning a variable to do to the arrays. of to-dos, and then curly bracket open. In between we would do console dot log to do, so we're passing the value of our array, and in order to extract the text, we would just do dot text and semicolon at the end, control save, and we have the same thing, take out trash, meeting, then test. So you can see this is a prettier way of doing it, and I think this is a better practice as opposed to doing it the other way. And if we wanted to get the IDs, we can do ID and loop through the IDs and grab the IDs 1, 2, 3. We can do, say, is completed, control save, so 2 true and 1 false, 2 true and 1 false. All right. So aside from these loops, there is something called high order array methods, which is the preferred way of looping through arrays, and I'm gonna do that here. So they're called high order array methods. So there's for each, there is map, there's filter. So we're gonna do the for each first, and in order to do that, you would specify your array, which is to-dos, and then the method for each. And these methods take functions with parameters like such. So you would pass in a function, and in between a function you pass in a variable. So these functions take variables as an argument, and then you would open curly bracket, and in between the brackets you would do the console.log part, console.log. So you would simply call in your variable, and if you want to loop through and grab the text, you would just do dot text. And if we save this, oh wait, something is wrong. Oh yes, I forgot to add the quotes, sorry, the closing brackets and the semicolons. So this is not supposed to be here. So that's how it's done. Your method starts from here, and then the method takes a function and the console.log line, and it ends at the end. And if we save this, this should work. There you go. So we have all the text printed out, and that is for our for each. And let's go ahead and do the map. So we're just gonna copy that and enter and replace the for each. Although the format for a map is slightly different, so you basically would create a brand new array with the with whatever object you want to grab from the upper array and assign it to a new array. And the way to do that is like so. For example, const say to do text equals to-dos dot map, and function dot to-do is the same, or function to-do is the same. And instead of console.log here, we would just do return. We would just do return to do dot text, close that, and we loop out, we go out of this method, and then do a console dot log, and we pass on the to do text variable or constant, which is here. So you can see here we have assigned the to-dos map method, and we have returned the text. So basically we're looping through this array, grabbing all the text values and assigning it to a new variable which is called to do text, and we console.log that. So if everything has been done properly, it should print out a new array with all those text values. There you go. So we have array with 3 different objects. Take out the trash, meeting, then disappointment. So you can see how useful that could be. So next up is filter, and as the name says filter, so it's filters things out. It's quite easy. Its format is, I would say, 90% the same. So let's do here const changes to completed, and let's do to do dot map, or not dot map, so filter, obviously dot filter, and we would do function to do, we leave it the same, and return part we would do return to do dot is completed. So this is the magic bullet. We give it a condition if to do dot if this is completed object equals to true, we would then console.log that. So that's the logic, and then over here we would just change this to do completed. Control save that, and we got, you can see we have an array with 2 IDs, the ones that are completed, true and true. So this is being ignored by the filter method. You can see the real life application of that. For example, you have a list of say 100 objects, and you want to print out the ones that have a certain status, and that's when you would be able, that's where you can use this method. So you can also tag another method with this method, so combine 2 methods, and to do that would be, you would just get rid of that semicolon, and then you would do dot map, say pass in the function to do variable, and you would return to do dot say text, and close that line, and then so the rest is the same. We would just save this, and you see we have now we have one array with 2 different texts, and take out the trash, meet with the boss, and they are only the ones that are completed. So take out the trash and meeting. So we have the take out the trash array and the meeting that are both completed. So we have a cleaner array here. And this is actually an example of function programming as opposed to object-oriented. This is a very powerful way of coding. So this is quite useful to keep that as a side note. So that is that for high order arrays. And now I want to move on to the conditional if statements. And for that, I don't think we need this array, so I'm just going to get rid of all of this. Conditional if statements, and we're gonna do a const, say x equals 10. So first we declare a value to a variable, and then we would implement the condition. So if x, I'm gonna start with the double equals for now. So if x equals 10, then we want to print out the we're going to print out a string called x is 10. And if we save that, we get x is 10. So that means the condition is met. And now when we do put double equal, the condition only applies to the value. And let's say, for example, if we put quotes around number 10, so now this is not a number, this is a string, so the data type has changed. Now if we put 3 equals, or if we just follow along with double equals, it still works. But if we use the 3 equals or the extract method, this shouldn't work. As you can see, we don't get anything in the console, because what it does is it goes evaluates the content of the constant and then also evaluates the data type, and then it says, look, data type is not of number, it's a string, so therefore the condition is not true. And that's a difference to consider. So choosing between double and equal is basically a developer preference, but if it was up to me, I would always use triple equals as a good practice, because I always want to match the data type of the variable. I just think that's the best way to go, because not doing that would causing issue in the system, and your code would basically be bug prone. So I would recommend always using triple equals. So we can add an else condition as well. So it's a next condition, and we could do else if this condition is not true, else console.log x is not 10. And if you just change this to say 20 and save this, x is not 10, so it's 20 now. If we change it back to 10, save, it's 10 now. So if x is basically, if this condition meets this, then this will apply. If it doesn't, then the first condition applies. So you can see the real life application of this. So we can also do else if, a third condition. Else if, say, else if we do else if say x is greater than 10, console.log x is greater than 10, else console.log x is less than 10. All right, so now if you save and print that, x is 10, and let's apply this condition, x is greater than 10. So if we do this, say 12, now we have that condition applied, x is greater than 10. And I'm gonna throw in a challenge here, what you should do to meet this condition. Obviously it's a no-brainer. If you assign a value less than 10 and save it, then that condition would be applied, x is less than 10. So we have 3 conditions here, and you basically condition as you see fit. Pause. Resume. So I want to show you another condition. We're gonna add another variable. Let's say const y equals 10, and we're just gonna get rid of all the other condition to make it simpler. I just want you to get a hang of the syntax for now. I know this is not the best way to do it, but this is just for educational purposes. So in this condition, we're actually gonna pass in two different conditions, and if either one of these are true, then we should be able to print out the line. So if x is more than 5, or is represented by double pipes in programming. If x is more than 5, or y is also more than say 10, then console.log x is more than 5, or y is more than 10. And if we save that, none of them run because neither condition are true. X is not more than 5, and also y is not more than 10. And if we change one condition to say 11, so this condition is true. If we save that, we get the console.log printed out because at least one of them are true. And if you want both conditions to be true in order to print out the message or do the console.log, then you would have to say instead of having double pike, you would have double ampersands that represent the and in programming. And if we save that, we get none because both conditions have to be true, not just one. And if we change it to 6 and save that, we get that printed out. So in this scenario, both conditions need to be met in order for the message to be printed out on the console. Save. So that is a short explanation of conditional if, and now I want to move on to something called ternary operator. So ternary operators, and syntax for that is like so. So you would do const say x equals 10, and then you would implement your condition. So const say color is the name of this condition, equals x 10. So we're assigning two conditions to this const color, and first condition is if x is more than 10, then then is represented by the symbol question mark, then print red. Else, which is represented by column in ternary operators, and then if else, print blue. So these symbols are ternary operators, and then we do our usual console.log color. So if we save this, we get blue because x is not more than 10, so hence we get color blue. Say if we change 10 to 11, now x is more than 10, then we should get this value. We get red. You can see how neat and clean this is. This is basically achieving a lot by coding less. So this would be an optimized way of coding. Pause. Resume. So I want to also implement the switch conditions, which is quite handy. So we leave everything else the same and we would just implement the switch conditions. So switch, the syntax is a bit different. So you would do switch and then you would pass in the above const. Then you open a curly bracket, and in between curly bracket you specify a case with a value, and you do a column, and then you would print out whatever message you want to print out. Oh, well, why did I do that? So console.log, and you would just write your message. So we'd say color is red, in case red, and semicolon, and then you also need to do a break. So you want to break out of this loop. Once you break out of that loop, you would do your next case. So case blue, colon, and then you would do console.log again. Why don't I just copy this line and print it here? Just change the red to blue and break out of that switch, and the last case would be default. So as opposed to case red or blue, you would do default, so meaning neither one. So in default case, you would do again console.log, and you would just print color is neither red or blue, and we need to break out of that switch as well. And if we save that, we get color is red because this condition is true. And if we change 11 to 10, we get color is blue. And if you want to apply the default, you need to get rid of either one of or both of these. So in that situation, if we just change everything to something like green and save it, we get the color is neither red or blue. So that is the application of switch condition. It is a very good way of conditioning, because say if you have to run 50 different conditions, you can imagine how tedious that would be to implement if else conditions. So it's best to do the switch in that scenario. That's a better practice of coding, and your code would be way stronger and scalable. Pause. So that concludes our ternary operators and conditions, and now I want to move on to conditions. Sorry, not conditions but functions. So we'll do functions. We will do function. Let's do add nums and open brackets. We pass two arguments on num1 and num2, and then we open our curly brackets, and then we do console.log num1 plus num2, and we save, and nothing happens in the console. That is because we haven't called the function. So the way it works with function is that first you declare your function, you pass in some arguments or parameters, and then you have to call that that function for it to trigger. So this is how you would call. You call in that function name, add nums, and then open your brackets, and then you pass whatever number. So let's do 5 and 4. So 5 as num1 and 4 as num2, and then you save that, and we got 9. So essentially we are adding 5 to 4. And what if you didn't put anything and just simply ran it like that? You get NaN, meaning not a number. So the system says that it's expecting a number, but there is no number. Hence we have the NaN error. So that is for that. And if we do 5 and let's say 10 and change this plus to, let's say, times or multiplication, and save that, we get 50. So we are passing this operation as opposed to plus. So you can manipulate it the way you want to, but that is the basic way of doing it. Pause. Resume. So now one more thing I want to point out, that in this scenario, when you have no value in the function calling, you can actually set your argument. You can actually give them default values. For example, we give a default value of 1 to num1 and default value of say 2 to num2. And if we save that and run it, we get 2. So 1 times 2 is 2. Or if we do say plus, obviously we get 3. So, and if you wanted, if you went ahead and did 5 and then say 5 and save it, you get 10. Why? Because this takes precedence over these default values. So this overrides these values, and default value is good to, in case if you have no values in the function calling, then you can implement those values. So you make sure that there's always a value. Usually there is no console.log in the function section, so there's something called return as opposed to console.log. So the syntax would be like return and then the argument num1 plus num2. And then over here at the bottom, you just wrap the whole thing in console.log. So you would do console.log and then add nums, the arguments, and then you wrap the whole thing in console.log, and you simply save it, and we have 10 again. So that is for that for now. So I want to talk a little bit about arrow functions. And arrow functions were introduced in ECMA 6. They are quite handy. They keep things a little bit clean, and then functions. So the way you would do that is you would actually replace the word function, and you would name your function like so, const add nums, and you would leave the arguments as it is, and right after your bracket you would do a equal sign and a arrow. So this is called fat arrow. You don't want to do hyphen and the arrow, so avoid that. You would use the fat arrow, and then you would leave everything else the same. And if you save that, wow, why did we got that error? Missing initializer in const declaration. Missing initial const add nums. Oh yes, I forgot that equal signs. My bad. This is the actual syntax. So you replace the function with a variable, assign the add nums to your const, and then put in the equal signs, and everything else would be the same. And save that. We get 10. So that is the arrow function. So I want to improve this code and make it a little bit lesser than what it is right now, since we only have one expression here. For example, we don't have say const y equals whatever. So we can actually go ahead and reduce this code drastically. What we can do is we can get rid of these curly brackets and change the return to console.log again. Console.log, and put our and cut that and pass in the argument in between the brackets, and just simply make the whole thing one line, just like that. And if we come over here and get rid of this console.log, and if we save this, yeah, it works. So you can see how, you know, lightweight and better it is, this this function, this arrow function. It's quite neat and cleaner than the usual function. To make it even cooler, you can actually cut this console.log from here and just get rid of those brackets and come down here and paste your console.log there. And wrap the whole thing in the console.log and save that. You see how clean that is? You only have a few parameters and variable, and you have a working function with the arrow function. Another cool thing is, say if you had only one parameter, you can actually get rid of this bracket as well, and just simply leave that. Plus the second argument, you could just assign a value, say 5, and you can come down here and do console.log, add nums, and just pass in one value of 5 and save that, and works again. So you see that big function came slimmed down to all these one variable and one value, and that is the magic of arrow functions. There's also something called this keyword. You would do this dot, which is very advanced. I don't want to get into that because if I do, then this course would be way too longer, but I just want you to know that there are certain advantages that work way better in certain scenarios, such as this keyword. So just keep that in mind. And with that being said, that concludes our functions part, and we're now going to move into object-oriented programming, or OOP for short. Object-oriented programming. All right. So object-oriented programming, and the way you would do that is using constructor functions, and we have already talked about we have already talked about object literals, but we're gonna create objects using constructor functions for this part. And to do that would be you would specify the word function and give it a name. So person with capital letter. You want to make sure that it is always capital for constructor function, because that is the syntax and you have to follow that. So person and open brackets, you would pass in your first variable. So in this scenario, we'll give it first name with camel case. So you want to have a lowercase for the first letter, and for the second letter you want to have a uppercase. That is the proper syntax. So first name, last name, and DOB for date of birth, and open curly brackets. In between curly brackets, you want to assign values to those arguments. So the way to do that would be this dot first name, this dot first name equals first name, and this dot last name equals last name, and this dot dob equals dob. And now below here we do something called instantiate an object. So instantiate object, and you would basically assign a variable, say const person1 equals new person. So we are relating this this variable, or inheriting, or this variable is inheriting from the function person, and we have the new keyword. Every time you have the new keyword, so you should automatically know that this is a constructor function. So we're constructing properties using the actual constructor function. So you would do new person, and in between the brackets you pass in values for these variables. You can either do single quotes or double quotes, but single quote is preferred. So we give it a John for first name, and Doe for last name, and for date of birth we give it, say 4/3/1987, 1987, and we close that line and we console.log, and we pass in the variable person1. So we pass in this variable. So as soon as we call in this function, constructor function, we should get these property keywords with these values. And let's go ahead and run that. And there you go. We got a array of person with first name John, last name Doe, date of birth 4. So you would ask why would we implement such function. So the usability of this function is when you have a first name and you want to have multiple values for different first names or different person. You could do person1, you could come down here, do person 2, 3, 4, 5, and have different values for each person, and simply inherit that to new person or constructor function. And basically you are constructing new values using this first constructor function. So we could do, say, copy this whole thing and just change the variables. For example, let's do person2 and change the first name to Mary, say Jane, and do, say, 5/7/1999, and come down here and do person2. You can even go to specific values. You could do person2 dot last name and save, and now we have Jane. So we're printing out person2 with the value of last name, which is Jane. So right now we have passed the date of birth as a string here. However, we can actually pass in an actual date using a date object constructor. So the way to do that would be to change this dob to new date, open brackets, and in between the brackets we have our dob value. So this is a constructor because you have the word keyword new in front of date. And if we go ahead and do person dot last name. Instead of dot last name, we could do, or we could actually do dot last name dot dob and save that. Okay, never mind. We'll just get rid of the last name, and we do person2 dot dob, and we get an actual date with the day of the week, Friday, May 7, 1990. You see that is way better than printing the date in a hard code manner. There's obviously new time and new other constructor that we can take advantage of, but we will not do that for the purpose of this video. And you can actually do dob dot say get full year and save that, and we get full year. Why is it not work? Oh yes, we didn't pass in the brackets. So if we save it, we get 1990. So we only extract the year out of person2. So we can also embed methods, which are pretty much or literally functions, and we can embed them in our object here. And the way to do that would be to go like so. This dot say get birth year. So get birth year equals function and we do return this dot dob dot get full year. Get full year. So get full year is a method, and if you come down here and do a say console.log person2 or person1 dot do person1 dot instead of dob we can just get rid of dob. We can do dot get full or get birth year. Get birth year and save that. We get 1987, which is this 1987. So as you can see, we have a function embedded in our object here. And let's do a full name. So this dot let's say get full name. Get full name equals function, return this dot dob dot get full name dot get full name. And actually why don't we use template literal so that you can learn something else in this function as well, so it would be more meaningful. For that we can use the backticks and the template literal syntax, which is $, curly brackets, and we would pass in the this dot first name, and likewise we can do a last name as well. So this dot last name, and we will end the code line here. So if you just copy this console.log line and do say person1 dot get full name, and save that, we get the year 1987 and the name John Doe. So that is basically methods within object or functions within objects. So you can embed any function and implement any of these object values and do whatever pretty much you want. So that is for object literals and functions within objects. And now I want to talk a little bit about prototyping. I want to show you here, for example, if you were to say just print out the whole person. If you control save and run this, as you can see, we get all the object values, as well as our functions get birth year and get full year. This is not the best way to do it. And if you look down here, there's a word proto. So what we can do with prototyping is we can embed our functions within the prototype so that it wouldn't show up in the inside the object, which is not the best way to do that. Without further ado, let's go ahead and do that. So in order to implement prototype, the way to do that would be to go underneath your function and start with the function name person dot prototype dot name of that the function within our object, which is get birth year, and we do equals function, and we come down here and do a return this dot dob dot get full year, and close that line, and we can go up here and get rid of this whole function, and we can do the same for our get full name. So just pretty much copy that, paste it here, and change it to get full name. Change that to full name, and also change this to get full name, and get rid of this function here. So now if we save this and run it, we don't have the functions within our objects. So if you click the prototype expanded, we have our functions within the prototype. So you can see that this is a neater way to implement it, because not always we want these functions to display in the object values, and because that would not be the best way to do that. So this is a neater way to basically attach your methods and functions within a prototype. And if you were to go ahead and do, say, person one dot get birth year and save and run it, we still get the year. So it does work with prototype as well, just to prove it to you. So this is pretty much object-oriented programming before ES6. So it's in ES5, and in ES6 classes were introduced. And to put that into perspective, let's print this one more time. So classes under the hood, they do pretty much the same as this here, as prototyping and object assignment, except for it has something called synthetic sugaring, which means it does it in a prettier and better way. So in order to do classes, we're gonna keep this instantiating of the object the same, and replace the this part with classes. So we're gonna go down here. So we'll do class person, and we class person, and we do a constructor, and we pass in the values, first name, comma, last name, comma, DOB, and we return a this dot first name equals first name, this dot last name equals last name, and this dot DOB equals new date DOB. And we can also pass in the functions. So the only difference is that you don't do the this dot birth whatever. So we would just do the specify the function name. So get birth year and open brackets, return so we do return this dot DOB dot get full year, and we can also pass in the get full name, or yes, get full name. So we would do a return, we do the backticks and pass in the object literal. So this dot first name this dot last name all right. So this part classes is doing exactly the same as this part of the object-oriented programming of objects, except for this is a prior way of doing it, and it allows people coming from different backgrounds that are introduced to classes. They already are familiar with class, so this is a neater way to do that. And why don't we run this and see if it actually works. So we comment that out and save, and bingo, we have the same thing. We got the objects with the name, date of birth, and last name, and the prototype, all the constructor, and our methods and functionalities. So that is classes. This concludes our object-oriented programming. So we can actually delete all of this. We don't need them anymore. And we can move on to document object modeling, or DOM for short. Spelling mistake. Document object modeling, or some people call it data object modeling, but it's basically manipulating your user interface on web browser. You can change layouts, you can change objects, you can change strings right on the fly using your Chrome browser or any other browser. It's actually model, not modeling, pardon me. So to do our DOM manipulation, I've actually created a HTML, index HTML boilerplate that I can share that in the video description, and I've commented them out so far, but I can get rid of the comment for now. And we're still gonna keep these items commented because we're gonna work on those later, so I'm gonna comment them back again. And also I have a boilerplate for our style which will be shared in the video description. So if you go back and I just want to show you a few important elements. So we have single element as well as multiple element selectors. And if you come here and do a console.log window is basically the parent selector for our user interface. So it owns all of the other elements. And let's save this and save the HTML as well. So you can see down here that window is the parent of all these other selectors. We have alert, we have A2B, blur, and so on. We should have alert here as well. I cannot see alert here, but it might be down there, but let's just do it here. So if we do window.alert and just pass in 1 and save that, we get this. This is the local address for this browser, and it says 1. So you can pass in anything and it would alert it in that window banner. So if we look down here, window has a whole bunch of different elements. What I'm looking for here is document, so which is right here. And the reason why I want to choose this is because document is what makes up the entire document. As you can see, when I hover over document, the entire user interface is selected because document is the entire user interface. And if you come back here and get rid of this entire console.log here, and in our element, so the way to select the whole document is using the word document, and you do document dot get element by ID, which is a single element selector by ID. And then if you go back to our index here, ID, if we look here, so if we look at our ID, for example, we want to get the my form ID. If you get the my form, so we gotta copy the entire ID and go back here by ID and pass in that ID. Obviously it's a string, so it has to be in between quotes. And we also need to console.log this, so wrap the entire thing in console.log. So console.log, and if we save and run this, we get that ID part, which is that entire form. We can even assign this whole element to a variable and console.log that variable, like so. Say const form equals document.get element by ID, and do console, not constructor, console.log form, and save that. We get the same thing. So we can assign the element to a variable and log out the variable if we wanted to. There's also something called query selector, which is a newer version of get element by ID. There was actually a library called jQuery, which used to do pretty much the same thing, or it still does the same thing, but jQuery is not very popular. But that is off topic. So what I'm trying to say is that query selector does exactly the same thing, or not exactly, but in a way it does the same thing as jQuery. So it queries or selects elements by their tag name, by their class, and let's go ahead and do that. So if we do console dot log and do document dot get, or not get but just query, document dot query selector, and just pass in maybe h1, which is a tag name, and save that. We get h1 JS crash course. Now we're working with single element, so even if there are say 5, 6, 7 h1s, it only picks one of them, usually picks the first one on top of the document. And if we wanted to pick more than one, then we would have to work with the multiple element, which we will get into in a later or right after a single element. So why don't we go ahead and do some multiple element selectors, so we can comment all of these out. Control / comment, and for that I need to go back to the index HTML and uncomment these elements here, or these items. And keep in mind that the class name for these items is items. So we're gonna save this and go back here, and if we do console dot log document dot query selector all, and pass in the class name, you gotta put that dot there as well, item, and save this. We get all of the items here. So these are these items that I just uncommented. So we're selecting all of them in this case because we're using the multiple element selector. And if you can see here, we have all 3 items here. And node list, what it is basically it is an array. So we can actually use array methods for each or for or while loops to loop through these items and pick them as we wish. So we can also do, say, let's copy this. We can do console.log document.get, and instead of query element, we can actually do get element by tag name here. Get elements by tag name. Get elements by tag name and pass in our tag name. Let's go with li, which is these tag names. So li, these are our tags, opening and closing li tags, such as h1 or h or div or p. These are all tag names, but in this case we're going for li tag name. And if we maybe we can just comment this out and save. We get HTML collection. HTML collection similar to node, but it is not an array, it's just HTML collection, so you cannot use array methods to manipulate it, just to keep that in mind. But that is the way to choose multiple tags using get elements by tag name, and we got all these 3 tag names here. Want to show you how we can manipulate or loop through an array in our DOM. So in order to do that, let's get rid of or let's copy at least one of these, maybe this one here. We can copy that or cut that and delete the rest. And if you just delete the entire thing maybe and do console.log item, and maybe we can assign it to a variable, say const items equals document query select all items or item, and we go down here and do items, which is this variable items, and we take advantage of the dot syntax and we go for each, and we pass in the item class name, and we would implement the arrow function, and we do a console.log. We pass in our class name again and save that. You can see we have looped through all of these items and printed all of them, item 1 through 3. Now I want to go ahead and actually change something on the user interface so that you have a better feel for DOM manipulation. So if you do say const say ul for unorderly list equals document dot query select all items, and then if we do ul dot remove, so ul is the name of ul is the name of this variable, and dot remove is the method. So we're basically removing this variable, whatever is attached to this variable. And if we save that, well, we got an error here. Uncaught remove is not a function. What did we do wrong? Const ul equals document dot query selector. Oh, not all, just query selector. There you go. Query selector. All of them should be removed. Why is only one removed? Query selector. Const ul equals document dot query selector items. Something is wrong. Ul dot remove. Should have removed all of these items. Why is it not? Let's go and see what is the problem here. So ul class items, that is why it's supposed to be items, not item. So if you save that, there you go. If you just get rid of this and see, there are no forms or no elements down here. So we just removed all of those by using dot remove method. So this is just one of the methods. There are many other methods that we can implement, and which we will get into a bit. Remove one element. There is something called last element or first element child. So let's do that. If you do dot last element child dot remove and save that, only the last one is removed, so the first and second item are still there. And if we do first, and the first one is removed, not the second and third. Here's another cool thing. You can actually change the name of an item in the user interface, and to do that you can do use something called text content. So we can do ul dot say first element child will stay the same, and instead of remove we can do text content and do equal and pass in whatever value you want. So say hello. So what we're doing is we're selecting the first element child or the first element item, and then using the text content property, we're assigning the string hello to it. And if we save that, the first one should turn, there you go, the first one is hello. And that is a cool thing about DOM manipulation. To use another methods doing and accomplishing the same thing. And to do that, so we're just gonna copy this, paste that there, and we can actually do children instead of first element child. We can do children and pass in the index value of say 1, which is the second item, and do .inner text as opposed to text content. You can use the inner text property, inner text, and assign that to say Ajmal, my name. And we can also do ul dot last element child, which is the last item, dot inner HTML. So we're implementing a tag to that item as well. We can do say h1, and we're gonna change the text to say goodbye. All right, and close that off. Not goodbye, but goodbye. Okay, didn't go through for some reason. Let's see what is the problem. ul dot children. Oh, this should be lowercase, not uppercase. Dot inner text, and then last element child dot inner HTML. Let's save it again. There you go. So the second element is my name, Ajmal, and the last element has changed to a H1, which is pretty big and bold, goodbye, and also the text is changed. So that is for changing that text, and also we can change the style of elements. Let's change the style of this button. So if you go to our index, and if we looked at submit, the class name is button. So we're gonna copy that name, come over here and do a const btn equals document dot query selector by class name btn, and now we can implement our method. So we do btn dot style dot, no, not that, btn dot style dot background equals red. So as soon as I save, this black color should change to red. There you go. So we have a red color here. So you might be wondering, why would we use these style background and inner text to change elements here? Why can we not do them in the document or in the style sheet or in HTML? The answer is that you can actually use events to attach these pieces of code to those events, and upon clicking you can change the color of certain elements or change the look of a text, bold it or make it italic, and you can really manipulate your user interface right on the fly. Dynamically you can change things. So that would be the advantage of using these type of methods and DOM manipulation. So speaking of event, why don't we go and do some event handling here? And to do that, we're actually gonna get rid of all of this and leave the first line, and we're gonna do btn dot why do we get that? So we go btn dot, no, oh, that's weird. So we do btn dot add event listener. So btn.add event listener and open brackets and pass in click argument, and then pass in another argument for our function. We're actually gonna do an arrow function, so we pass in a fat arrow, and then do a console.log. We pass the argument click here and end that line and end this line as well, and save that. And let's go here and open the console. Okay, something's wrong. Oh yeah, this should be btn. Okay, so save it again. All right, so if we click here, so if we click submit, so if you click submit, as you can see, it flashes and goes away really fast. That is because what the form is doing is, as soon as you click the submit, it sends the data to the file and it goes away. So in order to prevent that, we can add another line of code. So we pass the argument e and then prevent default. So we're preventing the default behavior of this form, and finish off that method, save that, and if we click, we should get a click word. We don't. Something must be wrong. Let's inspect. So we have click. Okay, button add event listener. Listener is correct. We have the word click and argument e.prevent default. Okay, that is fine. Console.log click. Okay, I found a mistake. Mistake shouldn't be items but btn, because we should be passing the btn class name, not the item. So we can actually inspect all of the objects within our event. So in order to do that, we'll pass the argument e here as opposed to the word click, and save that. And if we click, we get the entire all of the behaviors here, which is alt key, bubbles, button. There is a bunch of them, as you can see. And let's do e.target and save. And if we click, we get the target, which is the button class. So we get the button class. And we can also do target dot class name and save. And as soon as we click, we get the button. So the class name is button. So let's do something really cool. We can actually, instead of doing that, we can do document dot query selector, and we can pass in the ID of my form and change the style background. You can change the background. Why do I get element? I think I have some kind of extension. It keeps changing to that element. So style dot background equals, let's do this value of color, which is a dark color and close it off and save. So as soon as we click the submit button, this entire background should change to a darker gray. Bingo. So you see, this is the benefit of DOM manipulation. So using this piece of code, you can change the entire background and behavior of your user interface right in the fly. You can also add classes to your event. So in order to do that, if you go to our style, if you come down here, we have a BG dark class which has the background of gray and color of black. So we can copy that and use that for our class. So in order to do that, we can come down here and do document dot query selector. We select the entire body of our document and do dot class list dot add, and then pass in the class name, which is BG dark, and finish off that sentence and save. So as soon as we click on this button, the entire background should change as well as the background of this form. So let's go ahead and do that. There you go. So the entire background changed as well as the background of this form. So clicking is one event. There is a bunch of events you can implement if you look at the MDN documentation. So for instance, let's change click to mouse hover, or mouse over, not hover, my apologies, mouse over, and save that. As soon as I hover my mouse over this submit button, this entire style should apply. There you go. So as soon as you hover over it, the entire background changes. You can also do mouse out. I have my mouse here. If I remove it, the entire background should change. There you go. So those are different events. Been running out of time, but I just want to change this form to a little application to enter values here and print them out in the items below. So let's go ahead and do that, and I'm gonna get rid of all of this for now. We're gonna go back to our form and actually comment these out for now again, and come back to our main.js. So in order to create that application, we need to create a few different variables. So in order to do that, we do const my form equals document. So we're grabbing the form from the document dot query selector, and we pass in the ID of my form. We're actually going to copy this and paste this three more times or 4 more times to make that a bit faster. And let's change my form here to name input, and change ID to name, and change this variable to email input, and change ID to email, and change this to message, MSG for message, and change this ID to change this class actually to message as well. And lastly, change this to user list, and change the class to users. So what we're going to do in this application is we're going to enter values and assign values to users. So these IDs are actually in our document here. If you go here, we have our users. So we assign values or attach values to this user unorderly list. We have our my form ID here, and we have we should have our message here as well. There, message. Okay, so we go back here, and in order to do that, you need to create an event listener. So you would pass in the ID, the variable my form, and then you pass in the add event listener, and the event we're listening for is submit, and we're gonna pass in the argument of on submit, and we come down here and we need to write a function here. So we do a function of on submit. We're passing the argument of e for event listener, and we come down here and we prevent the default behavior of the submit. So we do e.prevent default. So we pass in that method, and we come down here and do a console.log, and we pass on the name input. I want to show you something real quick here. So if we click here and let's inspect, it basically prints the element tags and the element type. We're actually trying to get the value, not the tag and the element type. So let's do that. So in order to do that, you would use a dot syntax. So you would do dot value and save, and whatever value you put here, for example my name here, and then submit, you actually get Ajmal Majduddin Muhammad. So now it is doing what it is supposed to do. Now I want to add some kind of form validation. If for example I want both fields to be filled out and click submit. If the fields are not filled out, I want to print out some kind of message. So let's go ahead and do that. In order to do that, you need to add some conditions. So we get rid of console.log and we do an if condition. So if name input dot value equals an empty string, or email input value equals an empty string, alert. So we're using a standard alert here. Alert, please enter fields. So if they are empty, we print out this message. Else if they're not empty, or if they are full, then we would just console.log a message, success message, just success. All right, and let's save this and see if it works. Now if they are empty, let's just try the empty condition first. There you go, please enter fields. So that's the error message, and if we enter the name and the email and submit, we get success message here. You can even print out the success over here if you wanted to. In order to do that, you could just copy this and replace console.log with that, and just type success, and save that. Enter success. So it's really up to you what you want to do here. So using the standard alert is quite ugly because it pops out here, and that's not something I want to do. I want to actually print out the message in the text form here embedded. So let's go ahead and do that. And in order to do that, you actually use the message class. So we're gonna get rid of this alert part and do a message dot enter HTML equals please enter all fields. Please enter all fields. Finish that and save. So now if I click submit, we should get an error message here. There you go. So it says please enter all fields. Now it doesn't look very warning here, so we want to change the color to red. And in order to do that, I have a error style here, so I want to be able to apply that. And we're gonna go ahead here and just right before message.enter.html, we're gonna add another line of code. So we can do message again dot class list. So we're adding a class to our condition dot add, and the class name is error. We're gonna save this, and if we click submit, there you go. So it's pretty, you know, it shows that there's something wrong. So the background changes as well as we get the message. This looks way better than just a simple alert pop out. So I want to take this a little bit or one step further and make this disappear after 2 seconds. And in order to do that, there is a method in JavaScript called setTimeout, and we're gonna apply that right after the message.enter.html line here. So we do set timeout method, and we're actually gonna use a arrow function, so no variable required. So we do message dot remove, so we're using the remove method, and then we pass in a argument of 2000 for 2 seconds and save that, and this should disappear in 2 seconds. There you go. So after 2 seconds, there you go. So this is a lot better than just having it there forever. So now we're getting the values printed out, but what do we want to do with the values? We want to be able to append the values in our list. So in order to do that, you would actually create a variable. So we actually get rid of this message here, and we do a const li equals document dot something called create element. So we're creating an element of li, and we finish that line off there, and then we need to append to append our element. So we do append child, and again we do document dot create text, this time something called create text node, and so we create text node, and we pass in a create text node, and we pass a object literal here So we're passing name input dot value or we do a and the email dot value. So let's print this on the second line to make it prettier, and so we leave this like that, finish that off, and we also need to, this is not done yet, so we need to append, so we have appended that the elements to the, sorry, we have appended the fields to the element, but now we have to append it to the user interface as well. So we have this user interface variable here, which is getting the users field. So what we do is we do user list dot append child of li. So we're not done just yet. One last thing we need to do is we need to clear the fields after we append the values to the items. So we need to clear the fields. So we do clear fields, and the way you would do that, you would pass in your name input dot value, and then you assign it to nothing, so empty string. And same thing for email value, and you assign it to nothing. And so if we have done everything properly, we should be able to enter value and print out value in this form. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to enter any name and save that. So we have Alex Mo and with the email printed out here. And we can do another name and another email, so two of them, and we can do this and this, or even a dummy email. So there, we can use as many users as we want to. So that is working. Now we have a little application that we input values in the form and print them out. All of these values are not being saved anywhere, they're just in the user interface, and if I was to refresh that, they would all go away. The reason why is because this application is not attached to a backend system such as a server, so we could use Node.js or any other server application to basically send fetch requests to save these values into that file servers, and that is not a part of this course, so we're not going to get into that. And with that being said, this concludes our JavaScript crash course, and I hope you learned at least a little bit about JavaScript, and so you can start doing code and creating applications on your own. If you have any questions, you can feel free to comment below, and I will be more than happy to answer them. And have a great day. Bye.